everyone. I'm Lorraine Miller, the chair of the City of Fort Worth Redistricting Task Force, and welcome. We're going to begin this evening's presentations. We're just so delighted that you've taken the time to join us. This is a part of Little D Democracy. We're, as a task force, spending this month, this is our last public hearing, but we've spent this month listening to the residents of Fort Worth about redistricting and trying to give you a little education on what all of this means, not only to our city, but to you individually and your representation. So without further ado, our Assistant City Manager, Fernando Costa, will begin our presentation this evening. Mr. Costa, take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Muller. Thank you for your leadership of this redistricting task force, and thank you to all of the task force members and to the residents of Fort Worth who have joined us for this evening's public hearing. For the benefit of those who have not been involved in this process, and there are some who have registered to speak tonight, we'd like to provide a brief summary of task force activities to date, and then play a 7-minute video summarizing the preliminary findings of the redistricting task force. And so if I could ask Ms. Huckabee, you should see on the screen a slide with the names of all redistricting task force members, a total of 11 members appointed by the City Council last August. And you also see on the slide the names of several city departments that are providing staff support for the task force. Next slide, please. And here you can see an excerpt from the resolution appointing the task force, stating the City Council's charge for the task force to advise the council about redistricting criteria and procedures. The redistricting task force itself will not be redrawing council district boundaries. They will simply be recommending the rules, the criteria and procedures by which the City Council itself will be redrawing those boundaries after the U.S. Census Bureau next summer releases the block level population data from the 2020 census. It's important to note, by the way, that even though the topic of an independent redistricting commission has been brought forward often by interested residents, that topic is not within the formal purview of the redistricting task force. The task force is charged strictly with criteria and procedures associated with redistricting. And on the slide now, you see a schedule of activities to date, starting with the appointment of the task force back in August. You can see the various topics that the task force addressed during their meetings in September, October, and November, leading to their interim report to the City Council in December of last year. As Ms. Miller explained a moment ago, the month of January, next slide please, the month of January has been devoted principally to hearing for the public. We started with an informational seminar back on January 4th, and then we've had public hearings on January 11th in English, January 19th, this past Tuesday in Spanish, and this evening again in English on January 21st. We will be collecting all of the comments that we've received verbally in the public hearings, as well as written comments that we're receiving as well, either during the hearings or apart from the hearings through the city's website. We'll be compiling a summary of these comments and discussing them with the task force at their next meeting on Thursday, February 4th. We expect that agenda to entail extensive discussion of what the task force has heard and which aspects of what they've heard they would like to incorporate into their findings and recommendations for presentation to the City Council. The final report will go to the City Council on Tuesday, March 2nd, and we anticipate that the Council will be taking formal action to accept those findings and recommendations in whole or in part at the Council meeting on March 16th. So that's the process that we have followed and the process going forward, leading to approval of the final criteria and procedures by which the City Council will be redrawing council district boundaries. We anticipate as well that in August, we will have a joint work session of the task force with the new City Council. As you know, we have a City Council election coming up in May of this year. And so the council that's elected in May of this year will meet with the City Council, with the task force in August. If you've been following the news, you know that several City Council seats will be contested by virtue of being vacated, because we already have the mayor's race, which is wide open. We have 2 council members who are running for the mayor's seat, which means that they'll be vacating their seats, and at least 1 council member has already indicated he intends to vacate his seat. So we'll have at least 4 open seats, and others, and every other seat will be contested as well. So the membership of the City Council, when redistricting begins, will look considerably different from the membership of the City Council today. And then the new districts will go into effect in May of 2023 with that election. So much change lies ahead. And the Redistricting Task Force is really setting the stage for much of that change. And so with that background, we'd like, Ms. Miller, unless there are any questions from the task force, we'd like to introduce the video that presents a summary of the task force findings today.
Great. Task force members, anybody with any questions or comments?
Thank you very much. Let's play the video.
Great.
In August 2021, the City of Fort Worth will begin redistricting in order to form 10 new City Council districts. These new districts will be in place for the May 2023 election. In 2016, Fort Worth voters approved an amendment to the city charter to increase the number of City Council members from 9 to 11, following the completion of the 2020 census. This includes 10 district council members and the mayor, who represents the entire city. The Task Force on Race and Culture in December 2018 recommended the goal of ensuring that the City Council reflect the diverse communities that it represents. In order to create guidelines and procedures for the redistricting effort, in August 2020, the City Council appointed an 11-member redistricting task force to provide advice about the criteria and procedures by which Council should redraw its district boundaries. The task force is led by Lorraine Miller. She brings to the task a breadth of government experience. She served as the first African-American clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives from 2007 to 2011, and the first African-American to also serve as an officer of the U.S. House of Representatives. In her tenure in the public service, Miller has served in a number of positions in both the legislative and executive branches. During the Clinton administration, Miller served as a deputy assistant to the President for Legislative Affairs. In the late 1990s, she transitioned to her role as Bureau Chief of Consumer Information for the Federal Communications Commission. Prior to her service in the FCC, she served as Director of Government Relations for the Federal Trade Commission. The Fort Worth community is fortunate to have her serve as chair for the task force. Other task force members include Salvador Espino, representing District 2, Graham Norris, representing District 3, Craig Allen, representing District 4, Bert Williams, representing District 5, Linda Kennedy, representing District 6, Tony DeVito, representing District 7, Tracy Scott, representing District 8, Kent Bradshaw, representing District 9, and Bill Schur and Teresa Ayala, appointed by Mayor Price. In August 2020, the City Council charged the task force with evaluating the criteria and procedures by which the City Council has redrawn council district boundaries in the past, and accordingly, advising the City Council about redistricting criteria and procedures that the City Council should use in the future. In December 2020, the task force presented an interim report on the findings to the City Council. 10 key criteria were in the report. These include approximately equal size. The goal is to make all council districts approximately the same size. The task force recommended that the population of the largest district be less than or equal to 10% more than the population of the smallest district. Compliance with the U.S. Constitution, Voting Rights Act, Texas Constitution, and other applicable laws. There are many laws and guidelines already in place for federal, state, and local redistricting efforts. Some of these include no packing of minority voters, no fragmentation of minority communities, and no retrogression in the ability of minorities to participate in the electoral process. Although retrogression is no longer legally mandated, the task force would like to prohibit retrogression. Retrogression is the reduction in voting strength of a racial or ethnic minority based on a redistricting plan. The task force reaffirmed the need to comply with the laws that are already in place surrounding this important topic. Create minority opportunity districts in compliance with federal law to further reflect growing diversity of the city. The city values the contributions of our minority communities, and the task force wants to ensure that redistricting efforts will create minority opportunity districts. Contain communities of interest in single districts, with communities of interest defined as a local population with shared social economic characteristics and political institutions that would benefit from a unified representation. Contiguous territory for each district. The task force felt it was important for each district to be connected geographically so that residents live close to other members of their district. Compact districts. Just as the task force believed that the district should be connected geographically, they also believe the district should be as compact as possible. Identifiable geographic boundaries. When possible, the task force recommended that identifiable geographic boundaries be used to determine the district limits. This can include both natural and man-made. Contain whole voting precincts. In order to make it easier for elections, the task force recommended that whole voting precincts be kept intact within the new council districts. Contain whole census blocks or block groups. Likewise, the district should include whole census blocks and block groups whenever possible. Do not consider place of residence or incumbents or potential candidates. In order to make the process as impartial as possible, the task force did not recommend that the current place of residence for current council members should be included in the criteria. During the redistricting process, the public will be invited to provide input and also propose redistricting maps. A mapping software will be made available to the public so that they can participate in the process. Training will also be provided so that residents can understand the mapping software. The task force also emphasized the need for transparency in redistricting process by potentially requiring map drawing to occur at public meetings, with computer screens visible to all parties. All information will also be available online and in other locations that are easily accessible to the public. After the public hearings taking place in January 2021, these activities will take place for the Redistricting Task Force. February 4th, the task force will discuss comments from the public hearings and reach an agreement on final recommendations. March 2nd, the task force will present its final report to the City Council. March 16th, the City Council will adopt a resolution accepting the final report. July 2021, the Census Bureau will release data from the 2020 census. August through December 2021, City Council will conduct redistricting process. May 2023, City conducts the 2023 election with 2 new districts. All meetings are open to the public and available for viewing through Fort Worth TV, fortworthtexas.gov live stream, and the city's video library online. For more information on redistricting efforts in Fort Worth, visit fortworthtexas.gov/redistricting, Comments and questions can be submitted to fwconnection@fortworthtexas.gov.
Great. Can we proceed now, Ms. Huckabee? And how many people do we have that want to make presentations tonight?
Yes, ma'am. We have 21 people who have signed up to speak this evening.
Super.
Just as a reminder, everyone will have 3 minutes to speak. I will tell you when your time is up, and I will unmute you. Ruth is going to call the names out, and I will unmute you just so that you can start. And if everyone else will just remain muted until then so that we don't have any feedback, that would be great. So I think the first name, Ruth.
First up, we have Fernando Flores. And I believe he's a call-in user, Catherine.
Okay, hold on just 1 second. See if I can get you, Fernando.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Ms. Miller, members of the task force, city staff. My name is Fernando Flores, and I reside at 2740 Camp Hill here in the city. I'm here as a representative of the United Hispanic Council, and I'm also a member of Citizens for Independent Redistricting. I'm probably the old man in redistricting here in the city. I've been involved for 4 census cycles. One thing that I have seen that is constant in all of this is that those who hold the political power do the redistricting to hold on to that political power. That's what we've had, and that's unfortunately what this is headed to also. Although the task force, I'm going to commend you for having these hearings. Anyway, the problem is that the city has really changed, and it's now majority minority, and there's more of a need for diversity on the city council where all policy begins. It's time for change. That's the message we want to send. We need a city council that better reflects the population of our city. And we think that the way to achieve that is with citizen independent redistricting. In other words, an independent redistricting commission doing the map drawing that would be more fair, and quite frankly, this is about representation, about our democracy at the local level. I want to emphasize that. So we say, put this issue in the hands of the voters and let them decide in a charter election. The system we have now, to repeat myself, has been a disaster and may be a contributing factor as to why people have very little confidence in our city council and our city government, and why they don't turn out to vote in municipal elections. I also want to remind the task force that this is one of the recommendations made by the Race and Culture Task Force. All recommendations were supposed to be implemented. That was the promise. So no matter how they spin this, what the city manager, the mayor, the city council are planning is not much different than what we've had before. So I urge this task force to please ask those people to reconsider their decision about who will draw city council districts. Do the right thing. Ask them to do the right thing in time for the
Thank you so much, Mr. Flores.
The 2023 election. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Our next speaker is Berwick Ellison.
Mr. Ellison, you're unmuted on my end.
Okay, I didn't realize it. Am I unmuted now?
You
Yes.
are, sir. You're ready to go.
Okay, very good. You have my charts?
No, sir, we didn't know you were going to be using those this evening.
Oh, okay. I did submit them to Michelle, so you have them. So I'm going to try my best to paint a picture in your mind without without the benefit of my charts. All right. I'm Berwick Ellison with Citizens for Independent Redistricting Fort Worth. You asked for feedback on your criteria recommendations, so I'd like to offer some. I think it's great that you're recommending a quantifiable compactness test. In the not distant future, redistricting software is going to incorporate artificial intelligence because technology doesn't stand still. And so the result is that the council, which is reluctant to relinquish its mapping job to citizens, is going to relinquish that job to a machine that can draw thousands of configurations, weigh their pros and cons, and select the best option. And the only human input into that machine is the criteria that you're developing. Now, you can tell a machine to target a population or a simple number threshold or a range of values, but how do you tell a machine to follow the Voting Rights Act? So let me address something simple like compactness. The task force was quick to jump on the Polsby-Popper compactness test. You recommended a ratio of 0.05 as your threshold, which is a very tiny number, mainly driven by Fort Worth's irregular shape. And I'm going to suggest to you that Esri software might have some other tests that you might like better. So the Polsby-Popper is kind of like, imagine taking the perimeter of a district and inflating it with air like a balloon or a bicycle tire into a circle that has the same perimeter as the district. The ratio of those two areas, district to circle, is the Polsby-Popper number. Now, Esri also has a test called the REOC test that's also based on a circle. It's the smallest circle that you can draw that will circumscribe three or more corner points of that district. And again, you take the ratio of those two areas. And right away, if you look at that, you can see the drawback of these circle methods. There's a lot of excess air in those circles when you have irregular city limits or precinct boundaries. And you'll be able to see that in my charts when you get them. Now there's another circle test in Esri that's called the Schwartzberg test. It's like Polsby-Popper, but instead of taking the same circumference or same perimeter, this circle has the same area as the district instead of the circumference, and you take the ratio of their perimeters, not the areas. This will give you a bigger number. In fact, it's the square root of Polsby, and it has a higher threshold. So instead of 0.05, you could use 0.22. But there's an even better test, I think, and it has a terrible name of convex hull. And this is like wrapping your district with a rubber band and taking the ratio of the area, the district area, to the area of the polygon that rubber band makes. There's less excess space in the polygon than there is in a circle. Now, suppose you modify the rubber band so that it hugs the city limits and doesn't penalize you. Is that my limit?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. And if you would like to send those slides to Michelle, we'll make sure the task force gets those.
She has them. I'll send them again.
Thank you.
Okay, I will send them again. I yield back.
Our next speaker is Pastor Kenneth Jones.
Pastor Jones, you're muted, sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Miller and the Redistricting Task Force. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Chairman Miller, Pastor Jones, I come from the Como community representing Vote Fort Worth, community with common cause, Como NAC, FCLU, NAACP, and Community Frontline. These are communities leaders that have come together discussing redistricting for our communities. Let me just say and commend you quickly on the educational model that you have brought forth in this redistricting process. Education 101, we appreciate that. And even the 10 pieces of information that you have given us for us, the criteria. Chairman Miller, what I'm asking in a real sense is when we're looking at our community, African-American communities in particular, and minority communities in particular, we make up over 60% of this Fort Worth community, and we would like to see that we would have greater representation on the city council, moving from 8 to 10. Also, we would like to say, since I spoke back in October when TJ Costello spoke from Austin, he presented a very fine blueprint and model of how citizens and the city government can work together. And so what I'm asking is, when we look at the elections that are coming forth that Fernando Costa mentioned, and this is in my notes, that there will possibly be a brand new mayor, there will be a brand new mayor along with a brand new city council. And so a lot of these individuals may not even be up to speed in what redistricting is. Can we then yet looking at revisiting the RRC, the independent council system? Majority of these people not necessarily be a part of what you're going to be presenting to the city council in the month of March. And then secondly, finally, the next step, when it comes to the software Esri, what does that look like, Lorraine, as far as you are working with the citizens? First of all, that software is not out, the data is not out. And so what does that look like, and how we're going to be able to work with the task force as citizens in putting maps together and working with the city council?
Hi, Reverend Jones. It's Lorraine. Great, good to have you.
Thank you.
And if I can just answer your two questions. Let me take the last one first. So the city will have, will develop sessions so that citizenry will be able to work with the maps, get to understand and work with the software and how they're going to develop the maps. The other question was, tell me the first one again, make sure I got it right. Reverend?
That can be a brand new council that comes in May that's not even familiar with redistricting. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I had asked the mayor that she had agreed to was that we were going to have a workshop, a working session with the council after the numbers come out sometime in August, July, whenever the Census Bureau releases them. And so that even though this is going to be a new council, we would have a chance to refresh the new members of the council about it. Bear in mind too, that the city has a website. Our task force will sunset in March when we make our final recommendations to the council. But people will have an opportunity through this process to do two things. There will be a website that you can still place your comments, and you'll have to keep your eyes and ears open, but there will be a workshop for the software so that the citizenry can learn how to operate.
Okay.
Did I miss anything, Mr. Costa?
No, ma'am, I think you answered the questions. The only point I would add is that we expect to have the software available for the public to use around April of this year, so that we can begin training any interested residents in the use of that software around April. That's a few months in advance of the block level population data being available for us to use. So the training would occur using existing population estimates, not the official population counts that will be the basis for redistricting. But at least that'll help us to get some training so that when the counts are available, interested residents can get to work immediately and produce proposed council district maps that we will analyze and provide to the city council. Then the council will be able to consider the merits of those suggestions from interested residents. And as Ms. Miller was saying, the new council, the council that's elected in May of this year, will be doing the redistricting. Some of them will be totally new to the redistricting process. So that really adds importance to the workshop to be held in August. When Ms. Miller met with Mayor Price some months ago, I don't think they anticipated the degree of turnover that we can now reasonably expect to be occurring. So that makes Ms. Miller's request that much more important.
Foresight.
Foresight,
Yeah.
questions.
No. And do you know now, Mr. Costa, the software company?
ESRI, ESRI. They are the leading provider of geographic information systems, including redistricting software.
And how?
It's the same firm that provided the software for us after the 2010 census.
Great. And then how will people be able to know when the?
We'll get the word out.
Okay.
We'll get the word out through the same means that we're using to promote these public hearings.
Groovy smoothie. Thank you, Reverend. Does that answer your question? Okay.
It looks like our next speaker is Lon Burnham, and you are unmuted.
Lon Burnham. Oh.
Good evening, Ms. Miller, Chairwoman Miller. How are you this evening?
Lon, it's been a minute or two. I'm great. Good to see you. Glad you're participating.
Unfortunately, we didn't have an NAACP banquet this year. I would have for sure seen you there. Listen, I'm a volunteer with a number of organizations that are very interested in this process. I am not representing public citizens. I'm not representing the legal women voters. I am not representing the march to the polls, nor am I representing the NAACP tonight. But I do want to read a paragraph from today's paper, the article about it. I want to, one, compliment the task force because you've done a lot of really good work. But I think it's a mistake to accept the limitations that were put on your assignment. I think the council should hear in your presentation in March that at the public hearing on January 11th, nearly every public commenter spoke about the need for an independent commission. I agree completely with the first 2-3 speakers that you've had already. I think it's important that we drive towards actual citizen participation in the process, which means the first rule is citizens should be actively engaged in, and there should be an independent redistricting committee. As far as the availability of software in April, I'm wondering, will that information be sent to people that have signed up to speak? You have our phone numbers, our emails, just to make sure that people get adequate notice when that software is available. I know that it was spoken to earlier a little bit about how you're going to get that information out, but I'd like to hear an elaboration on that.
I think that's a great suggestion, and we'll be happy to notify everyone who has registered to speak at these public hearings.
Thank you very much, and have a good evening. I look forward to listening to the rest of the comments.
Our next speaker is Jody Gonzalez.
Jody, I believe you've called in and you should be unmuted. Jody? Jody Gonzalez. Ms. Gonzalez may not be here. I've unmuted all the call-ins. If you are here, if you want to, if you're here, please respond in the chat session, and we will get to you. The next speaker.
Our next speaker is Roxanne Cox.
And I believe that Roxanne Cox is with Bruce Miller.
They don't have your name.
Ms. Cox, are you with Bruce Miller's?
I am indeed. I thought you said Roxanne. I'm Geraldine. My concern really is, well, let's start with Mr. Costa and I have different views of what's a procedure. My favorite procedure to recommend to the council would be that they put the question on the ballot. They call a referendum and they let the folks in Fort Worth vote whether they would rather have an independent redistricting commission or have the boundaries drawn by the city council. I think that issue has not been entirely well vetted, and I think more community education on the question of how you would pick independent people would be a good thing. But it has been my perception in watching the council work for the past couple of years, maybe since 2017 to now, I've been observing what the council does. And it seems to me that if you measure what the council cares about by where the council spends most of its money, the council's biggest concerns have been with developing real estate and hotel industry and Dickies Arena and entertainment things, and not so much with public housing. No, we don't do much public housing. We don't do much public transportation. I think there are things that the people want, like independent monitoring of what the police are doing, that have not been priorities with the council and have been assigned to the city manager's office, where they kind of get steered through and come out not looking like what the people would have chosen. So procedure number one that I would like to see would be opening the process up and putting on the ballot questions for the community to decide independently, so that government by the people was more bottom up and less top down. I would also like to see a different calendar. We don't get, you all make your final recommendations in March of this year, and the actual data showing where the lines might have to go won't come out until July. The election isn't until 2023. So it seems to me that the people who are going to be tinkering with the data and deciding how they would like to form into coalition groups and decide, we are a community of interest here.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Okay, thank you. Summarizing quickly, then I just give more power back to the people and stretch the calendar.
Our next speaker will be Ms. Roxanne Cox.
And I think that might be Roxanne Lindsay. Let's try that. Roxanne, is this Roxanne Cox? Roxanne?
I think we just heard from Miss Geraldine Cox.
There's two different Coxes on the list.
It's not me. This is Roxanne Lindsay. It's not me.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, let's try one more and call in person. There's only two more options here. Okay, Miss Roxanne Cox, you're unmuted if you're on the line. Roxanne Cox. Okay, the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Fernando Peralta.
I know who that is. Fernando, you are unmuted.
Okay, awesome. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, awesome. No, first of all, I wanted to just thank the task force for what they've done, and especially Ms. Miller. I've been watching this whole process since it started, and I really want to just say thank you for just keeping it real and just, that even that in the first public meeting you said, if you don't, they don't. So, I want to kind of just say how this process is super important. And I really want to emphasize to the task force, and obviously Fernando Costa knows because he's worked with me here in Rosemont in the past, that I will always bring into the conversation our Hispanic community, and I just want to make sure that the process in which we reach out to our Hispanic community might need to look a little bit different than the way we do it to other communities. And so, but I also want to say that I'm going to keep echoing what everybody has been saying in all these public meetings, is that the importance of an independent redistricting committee to just keep building that trust. So for those of us here in the communities, especially in our communities of color, especially in the Hispanic community, so we can see that trust, and also to see our city council reflective of what our communities look like. So again, I just want to say, I know this is not easy work because I've been watching y'all at City Hall and everything, and it's tough work, but I know with Miss Lorraine at the helm and the members of the task force, I know y'all get this done right and make sure that our voices are heard from our community, because those of us, even the young ones in the community that are super engaged, are watching, so we can be part of this process and help with that accountability. So thank you.
Mr. Fernando, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So how would you suggest we better reach the Hispanic community?
Yeah.
What are if you could just put it in the chat. Can you do that?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat. Yeah.
Put it in the chat and we'll share it with the rest of the task force. I appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rick Herring.
Rick, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Good evening. I'm Rick Herring with Riverside Alliance, a coalition of 7 neighborhood associations in the Riverside community and the first and oldest neighborhood alliance in the city. And I won't disagree with my longtime fellow neighborhood advocate, Fernando Flores, that he may be the senior speaker tonight. But this is also my 4th experience with the city council redistricting process in Fort Worth. And this definitely promises to be the most exciting and interesting thus far that I've been involved in. In an effort to stay within the time constraints, I'm reading some prepared remarks, so excuse me for that. Also, I'm not going to speak to the redistricting process itself, but I'm going to be very selfish and speak to the needs of the Riverside community and Riverside citizens. Since the inception of single-member city council districts in 1975, Riverside has been divided among 3 separate council districts, and most of us in the community would like to be unified within one council district. While the many different council members we have had over the years have been attentive to the portion of Riverside that they represented, and in many cases we've been good friends, being divided as we have in Riverside for over 4 decades has led to countless challenges and difficulties in many different areas. Neighbors on opposite sides of residential streets have been in different districts for all these years. I'm just going to mention 2 current and very timely examples of problems faced by having our community of interest chopped up for political expediency. One, the primary commercial area in Riverside is the 6 Points Urban Village, which is located wholly within one council district. But when you step across 2 immediately adjacent streets, you are then in 2 other council districts whose council reps have little to gain from supporting our urban village, although many of their constituents benefit from the resources expended by the city of Fort Worth on this urban village. A second example is the Riverside Community Center is also located wholly within one council district, but it serves the entire Riverside community, again, which is divided among 3 council districts. We desperately need a new community center and an accompanying water feature to replace the demolished Sylvania Park pool. But it's difficult to expect this council person to lobby for a very expensive project in one extreme corner of their district
when it will also serve the residents of 2 other districts whose council members have to give up none of the scant resources that are allocated for these projects. And the burden is placed on one council member who obviously has competing needs in other parts of the district, their district, that have nothing to do with Riverside. We know it's always a struggle for council members to balance competing needs, but if Riverside were unified within one single district, it will be infinitely easier for that council member for that district to more adequately represent and address the needs of the whole Riverside community. In this go round, the addition of the 2 council districts will make this much more feasible. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Our next speaker is Danielle Bush.
I believe that Danielle may be on the phone line, so one moment, we're going to see if we can get that. Okay, Danielle, you are unmuted.
Hi, so this is my first time attending one of these meetings, and I have a question, so I don't know if it's the proper time to ask the question or is it just the floor to make a remark. But just after doing so much reading, I'm still trying to gain an understanding of what's happening in the redistricting process. It wasn't really clear. I read a lot of jargons, a lot of verbiage used that wasn't really crystal clear as to what happens during that process. So is that a question I can ask now and receive an answer, or do I have to attend a different type of forum to find that out?
Joe, we'll try to answer your question now. Just tell us what parts of the redistricting you want to know about.
So what
Go ahead.
happens in the redistricting process? Like, what are we hoping to gain when we do the redistrict?
Well, I guess one of the basic principles, and any other task force member that wants to jump in here, please do. One of the things we have a growing population here, and was it 4 years ago, 2016, we did a charter to increase our council districts by 2 people, by 2 different districts. And so the question, the outlying question is, how do we get 2 extra districts out of what we already have? That's the basic, I guess, the nutshell of this. And then how do we do it in an equitable way that there's equal representation? And, okay, does that kind of?
That certainly helps. So,
Okay.
So in this redistricting process, are we also looking to have more involvement or have more inclusivity of activities for people to do or minorities to do in this redistricting? Or is this simply, hey, we have 2 new seats and we need to figure out how to find a place for these 2 new seats to represent the people in this area?
Any other task force member want to jump in? Bill?
So I'll jump in just for a second. So
Sure.
the redistricting process is to divide the population amongst all seats that are represented. So we'll have 11 seats. 11, 10, 11. And the city is divided. And it's how do you not break up communities? How do you maintain minority districts so to ensure that minorities are elected on council? So those are the things that are taken into consideration. And the list, I think maybe you missed what our criteria was. It was one of the slides earlier in this presentation. But we are not drawing the map. The council will draw the map. We are just providing kind of the rules of engagement.
Yeah, I totally. Even if I wouldn't have, if I would have saw it, it wasn't necessarily applicable to me because I didn't quite understand it. So
sure, understood. Yes,
explanation right now definitely has helped tremendously.
And that's why we're glad that you joined in. Mr. Shore, did you want to, was your hand up?
Yes. It is true that redistricting has a great deal of jargon, but the goal here is to figure out how to divide the entire city of Fort Worth into 10 different council districts that
It's 10.
will, it's 10 council districts. 10 geographical districts. The mayor is elected by the entire city. The council members are represented by districts. So if you picture a pie, theoretically, you could draw a circle around the city of Fort Worth, and you could divide the city into pie-shaped slices. That would be one way to divide up council districts. Another way would be to draw a circle around downtown and make a square and divide that into 4 pieces, and then go around the rest of that square with circle and divide that up into 6 pieces. There are all kinds of ways that a city can be divided up. What we are trying to do is to establish and have criteria applied that will group the parts of the city together, not necessarily by some arbitrary geometrical shapes, but what we want to do is to keep communities of interest together so that they can, as some of the speakers have already said, be sure that they are adequately and appropriately represented on the council. So we don't want communities like Riverside divided up into 3 portions. We don't want the minorities, communities fragmented in such a way that they have no opportunity to elect representatives. At the end of the day, the goal will be to have a council that, pretty fairly resembles the makeup of our city and keeps communities of interest together so that they may effectively communicate with their elected council members. I hope that helps. I mean, I can't,
That definitely helped a lot. So basically during this redistricting, we're also working to ensure that each district has a person or council member that not only represents them physically, but also represents them in a way where they represent their interests, their concerns. And
Absolutely.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah.
And in the beginning of the meeting, I did hear him mention there are several seats that'll be coming up. And during that voting process is when we'll get to vote for some of those new council member seats that'll be opening up soon. Is that also tied to the redistricting, right? So.
Yes, because if you live in those districts, if you, those up and coming council seats that will be vacant and people will be running for, if you live in one of those current council seats, then yes, you'll be, it's your duty to vote.
Good.
That's been part of one of the things that we've noticed that's been duly noted during our hearings, that most people don't come out and vote in the municipal elections. And so if you don't vote, you can't, it just leaves you pretty void out there, because you have the opportunity to voice your choice. And if you don't, you almost have to accept the consequences.
I'm also communicate that both in my me being a transplant to Fort Worth, but now definitely a resident being here for over 10 years. One of the things that myself and several of my coworkers, friends, peers always say, there's not really a lot of activities that are geared toward things that we actually enjoy. And it's not that they don't have activities, they always do, but we always feel like they don't use the space that's available and that properly represents the city as a whole. So
Right.
I'm glad I was able to ask my question, gain clarity, and get an understanding.
And thank you, Ms. Danielle, for coming on and asking your questions. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Margaret Hendon.
Muted. Okay, Ms. Hendon, you are unmuted.
Thank you very much. My name is Margaret Hendon, and I am president of the Tarrant County League of Women Voters. And I'm speaking this evening on behalf of our organization. I have provided a copy of written testimony to the task force earlier, which has more detail than I'll be able to go into this evening. The League supports the criteria that has been set out by the task force, and we also support the concept of an independent redistricting commission. However, this evening, I wish to address the process recommendation that has been sent out. The process that is set out by the committee does not go far enough to ensure that the public is part of the map-making process. Our goal is to see a dialogue occur between City Council and the people. We want the citizens of Fort Worth to be included in the process, and we want their input to be taken seriously and reflected in the maps. This is how we think we can accomplish that. In addition to the recommendation already made by the committee, we would ask that the following items be added. Number one, City Council must hold robust public hearings as part of the redistricting process. They should be held across the city for geographic diversity before and after draft maps are published. City Council should hold 3 hearings to receive public input after the maps have been drawn, but before they are adopted. 3, the council and staff must equip the public to provide robust input. 4, City Council should provide adequate time for alternative views. Public comment shall be taken for at least 10 days from the date of public display of any proposed plan. 5, City Council should comply with all requirements of open meetings laws. 6, if a member of the public submits a map to City Council, they must include the person and/or organization's name that drew the map, data that was used to draw the map, and the reasoning for why the map was drawn the way it was. 7, council and staff must respond publicly to any comment that is a specific response to a map. 8, the records of City Council and all data considered by them are public records that will be made available in a manner that ensures immediate and widespread public access. 9, all votes by the council must take place in public meetings announced at least 2 weeks in advance.
Thank you, Brendan.
All right, thank you.
Our next speaker is Eva Bonilla.
So far.
Okay, Eva, you're unmuted now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Good evening, Madam President and task force members. My name is Eva Sandoval Bonilla, and I live in the Linwood Neighborhood Association. First, I want to thank the Redistricting Task Force for doing an excellent job so far by bringing very important criteria and procedures for the council to consider. Unfortunately, I tested positive for COVID in November and am just recovering. Therefore, I was not able to voice my concerns until tonight. Though my concerns have been presented to you at various times, I just want for you to know that as a president, a past president, current president of a neighborhood in District 9 and a past president of the Fort Worth League of Neighborhoods, I want to stress the importance of keeping neighborhoods together. As you heard from the Riverside gentleman, please keep their boundaries together. Also, I am in agreement with the Fort Worth Race and Cultural Task Force on their recommendation of an independent redistricting commission. I also have worked on redistricting committees in the past, and I believe this is the first time that we can have a fair way that our residents will be represented fairly. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva.
Our next speaker is Bob Willoughby.
Okay, Mr. Willoughby, I believe you are on a phone line, so I'm going to unmute the lines and see if you're on one of these. Just one moment.
Okay. Have you found me yet?
Okay. I
Can
found
do
you.
that? Okay. Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
for your
You can
time.
start
and Thank
now.
you for taking my call. Okay, let's get first to a lot of people have said some really great things tonight. I don't know. Here's some things I want to try to clear up real quick. I'd like to ask the council right now, or the city manager, is it not true that less than 1% of the whole population voted to add 2 council members? And I'll tell you what, because my time's short. That's true, and you can look it up, okay? It's there. Less than 1%. That's going to cost us around a little over $200,000 a year that I have figured out from their expenditures and their costs and all that. The thing about it is, no one's talking about that. And our education didn't talk about how much money or how many people voted for this. So the woman that said, let's put this on the ballot to add, which everybody, this has been real clear. We want a different task force. That's been real clear. Let's put it on the ballot. She was spot on. Put it on the ballot. Also put it on the ballot to require 20% to vote for 2 more council members. And can anybody, before the night or any time, answer me, what's wrong with requiring 20% to vote for 2 more council members? Okay? It's all of our tax money. We only got 1% voting for it. And the only way we're going to, and we do not need, and these people that want representation by race, I understand what they're saying, but I don't think that's the way to go. That's not it. I don't care who my council member is, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, or green. I don't care. Whether they're female, male, or whatever, I don't care. If they're one thing, if they're honest, we don't have that. Until we have honesty and council members and task force people. Also, at my website, fwdistrict5.com, you can see a lot of videos I made. My meeting with the chair is on there. And when I hear people say how good of a job these people are doing, they said a lot of stuff that's not true. They say a lot of things in the wrong way. The same thing with the city manager saying 10% voting. Okay, he might be right in one way, but go look at it. 21,508 votes put the mayor in office out of 800,000 people. Only 38,000 voted total. Less than 4% voted for mayor. All of the east side, less than 4%. 2 council districts, one hit 6 and one almost hit 7. That is the highest percentage voting. Overall average, you might be able to say 5%, but I'd even say less than 4. Voter education is what we need. None of these people work at that. We need to educate people how to vote before we add 2 more council members. You put this on the ballot that require 20%, it will fail as sure as day. You can bet the house on that. Until we have enough people to go out and vote for 2 more, we don't need it. We're over 200 understaffed and police. Crime is going through the roof over here, and we have council members and we have a task force that they did not answer any of the questions I called in at the meeting for the education. And
Thank
like
you,
I
Mr.
said,
Willoughby.
thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Our next speaker is Bruce Miller.
Mr. Miller, you are unmuted.
Thank you very much. So Bruce Miller here. I'm with Citizens for Independent Redistricting. By eliminating the inside-outside and residency criteria, the current task force has served the citizens well, but they have not gone far enough. They should not let the city staff limit their scope, but rather proclaim their independence and at least seriously consider the recommendation of the previous Race and Culture Task Force. They should note that only the 4 co-chairs of the previous task force were appointed, and that their agenda was decided by them, not the city staff. The present task force should recommend the establishment of an independent redistricting commission to take up where they're leaving off. At the January 11th meeting, the task force heard from two groups, one in support of an independent redistricting commission, another that emphasized a series of open meetings to gather information and suggestions from communities. Mr. Shore questioned what procedures an IRC could follow. Well, there they are, spelled out in some detail by the second group. A city council would not be available to meet as a group in different communities, but an IRC could do just that. Consider that it's difficult to get a single councilman to attend a neighborhood association meeting, although it does happen from time to time. In describing the procedure employed in Austin, T.J. Costello explained in detail the hard work performed by an independent commission. In absence of any meaningful task force consideration of an IRC, Lorraine Miller encouraged citizens to find candidates who will take up their cause. We can see that that has already happened. As part of her platform in her bid for mayor, Council member Ann Zeta has taken on the two major recommendations of the Race and Culture Task Force that were denied by the City Council: the establishment of both a police review board and an independent redistricting commission. It will be interesting to see if other candidates also rise to the challenge. The current task force needs to get behind an IRC. The idea of waiting 10 years for good government is not acceptable to our citizens. We need action now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Our next speaker is Kat Kroll.
Ms. Kroll, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Sorry for the rough voice. My name is Catherine Kroll, and I'm a resident and the president of the Brentwood Oak Hills Neighborhood Association in District 4 on the east side of Fort Worth in the 76112 zip code. I'm speaking in favor of this task force to recommend to the City Council that they establish an independent redistricting commission. Flat out, just tell them the people have spoken and they want an independent redistricting commission. I don't want the maps drawn by any current City Council member, and I know 4 of them by name. And we have to be allowed to draw. It's for the citizens who live here. Not being allowed to recommend an independent task force actually hampers what your whole purpose is. Giving it over to the council cuts us out. As a citizen, John Matt will keep the older neighborhoods together and keep the voting box and cultural identity and prevent the stupid gerrymandering divisions that occur right in my own neighborhood. I want to sign up to be one of the software trainers, and I'll send you a private message about that. In order for Fort Worth to become a better city, we need better council districts where the elected officials are within arm's reach of their constituents. I support the task force recommending an independent redistricting commission with the full authority to draw the final maps that will serve the city for the next 10 years. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Janice Mitchell.
Okay, 1 minute. I think, Janice, that you have called in, so give me just 1 second. Okay, Janice, you should be unmuted. Janice, you should be unmuted. Janice Michelle?
Oh, sorry. My name is Janet Matern. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Tarrant County. I am speaking today as a citizen of Fort Worth. I wanted to thank the task force for providing this opportunity to speak today. I also want to add my voice to encourage the city to establish an independent redistricting commission. In addition, We do need transparency and open meetings for the entire process. We need at least 10 days notice for public hearings. And we do need those hearings to review the draft maps, not the final maps. And we should also make sure that these meetings are held in each of the council districts so that they are spread out across the city. We need mapping software to be available, and we need the current data as well as the census data and training on how to use this software and the data. And it would be good to have all of this software and data available at the Fort Worth libraries. I support the criteria for redistricting to be in compliance with the Constitution, the full strength of the Voting Rights Act, applicable laws, so that we have no packing of minority voters, no fragmentation of minority communities, and no retrogression in the ability of minorities to participate in the electoral process. We need to create minority opportunity districts that reflect the growing diversity of Fort Worth. We need to minimize division of the communities with common interest so that we can have subdivisions and school districts included in the direction of the maps. Due to the boundaries for current voting precincts, I recommend to minimize splitting of precincts rather than keeping them whole. The residents of incumbents should not be in consideration, as Fort Worth citizens must select their candidates. We must not have candidates select their voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Catherine?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Lorraine. I just wanted to point up, I think we've had 3 speakers tonight to say that we needed to have the hearings in each of the council districts. You know, we had considered that early on, but with COVID, this was the most healthiest way that we could still get citizen input without endangering anyone. So at the very outset, I think that was what we wanted to do, but we just couldn't in a sense of trying to protect the public from this dangerous virus out there. And so that's why we're not doing it. I just want to make sure people understand that these virtual hearings are an effort to still reach out because we can't do the face-to-face. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. We're going to try one more time and see if Janice Michelle is on the line. Janice, your phone is unmuted if you've called in. Okay, we're going to go to the next one then, Ruth.
Our next speaker is Tara Wilson.
One moment, Tara. Tara, you should be unmuted.
Did you say Tara Wilson?
I did.
Oh, hey. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I've been on hold for so long. Okay.
We're sorry.
Sorry. No, not at all. I honestly want to say to everyone on the call that I'm so excited that 21 people decided to sign up tonight. So that's really good. We need that community engagement. I came on Tuesday night and gave my statement in Spanish for the Hispanic and Spanish speaking community. So I will be reading what I read that night. So I apologize for the repetition, but I think it's important that I also verbalize that in English as well for the record. So, hi, my name is Tara Wilson. I live in Fort Worth, zip code 76112. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of my Hispanic, Black, Latinx, minority, and marginalized communities, Fort Worth. In 2017, the Race and Culture Task Force recommended to City Council that an independent redistricting committee be put in place to equitably represent the growing demographic changes of Fort Worth. They did not do that, and it is a recommendation I believe that should have been followed and should still be abided by. It is an inherent conflict of interest for city council members to draw the lines of their own districts. In addition to the recommendations of the task force, I ask that to ensure a fair and open process, the whole public be a part of the entire process from start to finish, which means that there should be public hearings with public testimony on any proposed maps as they are being drawn and altered, that there should be public comment and public input about the reasoning and creation behind those maps and all parties involved in the drawing of proposed maps, and that there should be public hearings and comments on any proposed maps after they are drawn, but before they pass through committee, that all maps drawn follow state law and do not violate the Voting Rights Act in order to give minority communities, especially the Hispanic community, Spanish-speaking communities, and marginalized communities, the ability to pick representation that truly reflects the needs that they have. I thank you for your time tonight, and I ask these recommendations to be taken into serious consideration. Furthermore, I do want to commend the task force that have been tasked with this hard position that you're in. I know that a lot of you care about this process being open and fair, as do the rest of us. And I just have to say that I heard someone earlier talking about that they are somewhat irritated about this being wanted to be represented by someone that looks and sounds and may be of the same race as you. But as a fan of yours, Bob Willoughby, I will say that as a middle-aged white man, I feel that that's quite convenient of you to say. And the rest of us are tired of not seeing people that represent us on city council. So with that being said, we will continue advocating for our Latinx, brown, black, and hardworking class communities of Fort Worth, and that will be the way that I feel going forward. For transparency purposes, I will say that I am an official candidate for Fort Worth City Council District 4 in this election cycle, but as a private community member, this is an issue that I've been following since the fall of last year, and whatever the outcome of this city council election is, I will be continually being a part of this process as we go forward. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Erica Ramos.
Erica, you are unmuted.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Hi, my name is Erica Ramos and I live in District 3. Similar to Tara who spoke before me, I want to start by applauding every single member of this task force. I took the time to review past working sessions, and I think y'all all did a really great job of asking the right questions and putting together the preliminary criteria we're reviewing. I do believe we are headed in the right direction, and I'm thankful for your time, commitment, and your service to this effort. I do have 3 asks for this task force to consider during your next session. My first is that the criteria stating new districts should not take into account incumbent or potential candidate residences should be moved to a high priority. If council is to draw the lines, I ask that this priority is increased to help prevent any semblance of self-interest or gerrymandering. My second ask is that the task force reconsider the number of public meetings in the communication plan. I believe 5 public meetings were recommended. I'm not sure if that still holds true, while Austin shared that they had hosted 50. Please consider increasing the number of meetings or suggest that creative ways are considered and provided for ensuring residents have as many opportunities to engage as possible. My last ask echoes the sentiments of many other residents who have already participated in these calls and today. I ask that the task force strongly reconsider recommending the implementation of an independent redistricting committee, or noting in your final report the high demand from residents during this call. If the task force chooses not to or cannot include this recommendation, I ask that y'all share the information with the public on what they can do to move this request forward. It's imperative that our elected officials do everything possible to earn public trust and demonstrate transparency, especially in a process that only occurs once a decade. Should the decision to allow council to redraw the lines remain in place, I ask that the task force consider recommending that any deviation from the proposed criteria be documented and shared with the public. A deviation from the stated criteria should include council's reasoning and the name of those council members involved in that decision. I believe the public has a right to know why and who broke away from this task force's recommendations. Lastly, I want to thank you for your time and your consideration today, and I really look forward to participating in future sessions with you all. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is George Phelan.
George, you are unmuted.
Okay, I appreciate that. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Good evening, task force members. Though I represent myself, I do want you to know that I am president of the Bonnie Brae Neighborhood Association. I am a member of the Riverside Alliance, along with my good friend Tim Herron, the moderator, and Council Moon appointee to the Capital Improvements Program Citizens Advisory Committee for Water and Wastewater, and a Councilman Flores appointee to the new Diamond Hill Community Center Art Committee. So I just want you to know I'm engaged, and I'm also informed. And that being said, I would just like to say, first and foremost, I would like to request that an independent redistricting commission be formed so that this effort is represented by the various individual and unique communities for which it is tasked to consider. Council members are elected by the representative communities and not appointed by special interest groups with no connection to the community at large for which they seek to represent. If that is not to be the case, then I propose that we consider this issue in a rational rather than racial way. As an Hispanic American, I do appreciate the fact that folk want to be represented by their own, but we must be realistic. As long as the needs of the community are met, I will support any candidate that does just that. Otherwise, it causes divisive mentality of we versus them, when in reality, we are all in this together, as has been espoused in our current political environment. Though I use the word political when these positions are supposed to be nonpartisan, I'm just being real, as I note that current mayoral candidates have strong and public ties to political parties. I suggest we look at communities based on commonalities within the various populations and infrastructure needs, such as the age of the community and its infrastructure, employment stats, public school achievement level, shared interests and concerns, demographics and community culture, etc. Let's be honest with each other. Communities outside of 820 have issues regarding east and west arterial streets, new community facilities, lack of services, while communities within 820 have issues regarding aging infrastructure like lead pipes, outdated libraries and community centers, no safe sidewalks to school, etc. On a personal note, I request that the greater Riverside community be kept whole as one unified council district. I pray we as a city get this right. I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Julie Ledford.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
You're unmuted. You're unmuted. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I'd like to thank the participants of the task force and then also the speakers from the audience. I'm part of Historic Hanley, and I had sent a question in advance about clarification of the maps because it wasn't clear if it would be divided. It was difficult to see with all the tiny maps, so hopefully there'll be a follow-up answer to that at some point. I just wanted to bring up the topic of, east side versus west side, and so that I have concerns about redistricting. I'm a lifelong resident of the east side. There's a lot of proposals currently that would be impacted by topics such as redistricting, such as the BRT, the PID, and the Southeast Connector. I do have concerns about our current Hanley Neighborhood Association as it relates to community engagement. Catherine Huckabee, who's moderating the current talk, is also visiting our meetings, running the agenda, speakers, and we don't have a voice at our neighborhood anymore. So when we talk about things like redistricting, to me, those are all connected. And here's what I'd like to request. Because of systemic and historical bias of the current community council, I'd like to ask, as other people have asked, for objective opinions, not gerrymandering, that are absent of political influence. I think an independent committee without vested interest is a good idea. And we'd need to recognize diversity, make sure that we have equitable outcomes. And then one particular point I'd like to raise is that Mideastern people don't have representation in the census at this time, and our new president, President Biden, has an opinion about this representation and developing a category for us on the census, because currently this category is invisible and not counted. So when we talk about things like redistricting, it makes it difficult to count a minority if they're not recognized. And I've done extensive research into this, grouping Mideastern into Caucasian, because I'm a first-generation American on my father's side who's of Turkish descent. So it's really important for me, just like for all the other categories, that we, be recognized. And I think diversity and equity is just really paramount in this current redistricting. I do have a question about how do citizens submit comments or recommendations to the task force. And then lastly, I'd really appreciate entertaining the idea of postponing redistricting temporarily to accommodate for the pandemic. I know there have been a lot of challenges with all the things the city's had to do to accommodate for that, but I'm hearing overall, as I'm listening to everybody speaking, that there are concerns about moving forward, or that people haven't been heard. So I just want to make sure that you honor our request to make sure this is done in a not only timely manner, but cognizant of all the people that need to be included in this discussion. So again, I'd like to finish with my questions about how do citizens submit comments and recommendations to the task force, and whether or not historic Hanley is going to be divided, because it was hard to see with those maps. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So that's the last of our speakers this evening.
Well, can I just kind of answer a little bit of how citizens can still submit comments and even maps? The city has a website. If you go to the fortworthtexas.gov and click on redistricting, there's a website that the city has developed just for residents, just for folks like you and I who want to offer comments or suggestions. Please go there and feel free to load it up. The more you use it, the better off, the more seriously I think it'll be considered. And we'll just have to stay tuned to when the software training is available. Anybody else have any comments, task force members, that you want to offer? Bill?
Yeah. I would just like to add that we are citizens on this task force, and anyone who wants to send us detailed explanations, you should send them to the group. But you may also, I believe, and Fernando, Mr. Costa, tell me if I'm wrong, you may also request that the city forward them to the task force members.
Yes.
Be happy to do it. And speaking for myself, I would like to see as many of these comments in writing, particularly those, again, which have specific procedural recommendations. I mean, I think we all understand fully that the speakers would like us to take a strong position on independent redistricting commission, even though that is outside our task. But with respect to other procedures, with respect to technical issues, such as our choice of what kind of mapping polygons or compactness tests should we use, I would welcome anything further that is provided. And I think many of us would. So we have a lot already to assimilate in a short time, but I am sort of requesting that you, if you want to add some information, please by all means send it in and do it as quickly as possible so that we on this
we can consider it. Yeah.
And Ms. Miller, we had a few chat questions. They wanted the exact email address, and so it's on the screen.
It's on the screen.
connection@fortworthtexas.gov. That's where they email their comments, and it will be sent to the task force.
Okay. FW connection@fortworthtexas.gov. Yes. Mr. Williams?
Yes. I would just like to make a couple of comments here.
Absolutely.
One thing I'm really interested and proud of the people that have participated tonight in the program, in a sense, and talking. And you had some very good ideas. And I think one of the things too, kind of get me to think back in the late 70s and 80s when we were dealing with single member districts and all of that. And one of the things that I think that we want to make sure that they understand is that make sure you go and check the material out, and that you want to be able to draw maps and be able to have an idea about what you think is the best way to do it. And for you to have the experience when the census numbers come, you'll be in a position to really sort of put your training together, whereas you'll be able to really kind of do what is necessary, because the lady was asking earlier about the way that the maps are going to be drawn. And I think that the task force people did a very good job of explaining how that process could work. But the more involvement that you are in the drawing of the maps, and also talking with the council people and working with them, so that you'll have a lot of input into the drawing of the map, so you can really kind of get a lot of your questions answered at that time. And you can be part of the process rather than waiting and letting someone else draw the maps that you will have to live by. But you'll be in a position to have input into the drawing of those maps. I think that'd be very successful, and you'll really enjoy doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any other any task force members with any comments?
Lorraine?
Yes.
So, again, yeah, just given the fact this is the last public meeting, and you know,
identify yourself, brother, Mr. Bradshaw, so everybody that's on the phone can and on the
sure.
Kent Bradshaw.
My name's Kent Bradshaw. I'm on the task force representing District 9, and this is the last public hearing we're going to have on the Redistricting Task Force for public comment. As a citizen, I would like to thank everybody that did participate in the past 3 meetings. I would like to say that my individual opinion on this is that if we look at the maps that have been drawn over the years, you have to take into consideration the legacy and the history of the people who drew those maps, right? And I would say inertia is a pretty strong thing. And so at the end of this, if we don't do something that is independently drawn, it's going to go back to a city council that was elected based on the maps that we have in place. And I do think that that's an impediment to really taking a fresh look, and it's going to basically exacerbate or extend the process that's been in place, which I think most of us have agreed has been flawed and inexpedient. So I think that the city council should be about the business of the city, and they shouldn't be spending their time worrying about maps and how it's going to affect them. They need to be worried about the things that are affecting the city and not about their future election. That's my comment.
Thank you, Brother Bradshaw. That's a good soapbox. Anyone else?
I'd like to comment. Hi, I'm Tracy Scott. I am representing District 8. I just want to say that it has been an honor to serve on this task force. Redistricting is super important, and thank you to all of the citizens that have voiced their opinion and asked questions, because it's a way to help everyone else understand and get more clarity. The criteria is what it is, and we're going to have to live with that. And we're trusting our council members to do the best is what we are left with. So I think we should go that route and be thankful. and then we'll see what happens in the end. But I just want to say thank you, Chairman Miller. Thank you, Councilmember Gray, and the fellow task force members. I have enjoyed being on this task force.
Ms. Scott, it's not over. we have a meeting in February, and then we have our final recommendations to the council in March. So, and then we have our meeting later in the year.
I can thank you again at that point too.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, task force members, I just want to say personally to thank each of you for your participation and listening to the residents of Fort Worth. I was, when Mrs. Huckabee said we had 21 people prepared to speak tonight, I thought, Shazam, this is great. This is what, as a task force, we started out to do, to try to get the residents of Fort Worth involved, thinking about it, educating, telling them what redistricting was all about, and then hearing their concerns. That's what we are here to do. And one of our mantras of this task force is to hear from you, the residents of Fort Worth who are going to live with this, and to get your input. And once we do that, we want to honestly reflect your concerns and your comments. And we're going to review them at our February meeting to come up with our final recommendations. But I do want you to know that even after we make our final recommendations, the game is not over. You still have FW Connection at fortworthtexas.gov that you can send in comments. If you decide you want to draw a sample map, all of that will get to the council for their consideration. And on behalf of the task force, we appreciate each and every one of you for the time you've taken. You've been so thoughtful. Mr. Ellison, the League of Women Voters, and all of the Riverside Alliance group. I mean, this is what this is about. That gets my juices going to know that you are involved. So, anything else, Mr. Costa?
I think you covered it, Ms. Miller. Thank you for, again, conducting an efficient and inclusive public hearing.
Well, we want to thank the staff too, because a lot of times we sit here and we come on our little video, our little virtual things, but without their assistance and helping us, supporting us, helping us getting the agendas. I think we are a pretty independent group because they may want us to go one way and sometimes we go another, which is the way it's supposed to be. Without if there are no other comments, anybody have anything that you want to say? Then our meeting is adjourned for the evening, and thank you for participating. This has really been I think, a very fruitful exercise. And I want people to understand, you come, you make your comments, you're being duly noted, and it is not going to just go off in, as my mother would say, woo land. It will be noted. With that, thank you, and everybody have a good evening.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Night.
Good night.